The great thing about pitching to Spotify playlists is that anybody can do it. If you are uploading your music to Spotify, then all you've got to do is go into the back of Spotify for Artists, click Music, click Upcoming, and then you can pitch your music to Spotify algorithmic playlists. But whilst anybody can do it, how do you give your music the most amount of chance of getting on some of these playlists? Well, the truth is there are some helpful hints and tips that might make all of the difference. But first, let's look at why this is so important. Now, as you are releasing music on Spotify, what we are trying to do is we are trying to get our music on Spotify radio. Now, most people think they're trying to get their music onto Spotify playlist, but that doesn't tell all of the story. You see, radio is where you see a huge amount of growth. But you can't just attach your music to Spotify radio, you've got to actually build into it. So the way it works is we work backwards. We want to get on Spotify radio. In order to do that, we have to build up into some playlists. In order to build up into some playlists, we usually have to build up some data. And most artists get frustrated because they're pitching music to Spotify and they're not getting into playlists. But we have to be realistic with how much music is being uploaded, and part of this might be in how it is being pitched. But even if we don't get music into any Spotify algorithmic playlists, there's a good chance that we can still get traction, because in doing this, we will probably get your music into people's release radar. Now, release radar is a weekly updated playlist, algorithmic, that puts people's favorite artists or people's artists that they follow, the new tracks into a playlist. So it means that they can follow along, they can find these new tracks from artists they love. Now, as we release more music, we are building up what's called the authority score. Now, the authority score is very, very important. The authority score is in your song or songs, but it's also in your profile itself. Now, the authority score, like every other social media platform, is the data collected. So every time someone listens to your song or songs, then that data is going into the platform. So if someone saves, if they listen to the entire song, if they listen to it many times, if they add it to a playlist, all of this is giving you an authority score. But if they are skipping, if they're not listening, if they are jumping over it into listening to other songs on a playlist, then that also gives you a score. So we're trying to push the score up. But the good news is this score isn't just done in the first 24 or 48 hours. This is something that we can build up with your song over a period of time. Now, pitching to Spotify playlists differs depending on how big an artist you are. If you are a huge artist, it is different to if you are an up-and-coming DIY artist. Huge artists will actually have curators that are going to listen to their track and decide where that track is going to go into which playlist. Obviously, we're not as fortunate when we are an up-and-coming artist and we don't have as much data, so then it becomes an AI algorithmic decision. Now, this is the key. This bit's important. This means it is not the subjectivity of one person or one gatekeeper who makes that decision. So whilst it's not as good because we aren't getting one person giving you the old thumbs up, what it means is we can now build in data. We can do this a different way, so we are looking at the subjectivity of lots of listeners and lots of data. So where do we start? Well, we start pre-release. In fact, we don't even start with the song. We start with your Spotify profile. Spotify wants you to take Spotify seriously, and if you take Spotify seriously, it will take you seriously. So that means you have to have your About section. It means you have to have your social links. It means you have to have pictures. If you do have any merch, that should be attached. There are so many things that you can do with your Spotify account that most people don't do, even if they have released many, many songs. You are basically treating Spotify well. You are saying, I will look after you. I will try and bring people here. I will try and get them to stay on your platform. And Spotify says, thank you. If you can do that, then I will reward you. But then we need to look outside of Spotify, especially in socials. We want people to see you as a professional, high-standard artist, which means not just the consistency, not just the numbers, but the quality itself. Now, one thing that's very interesting, especially with Instagram, is you have Instagram feed and you have Instagram Reels. Now, Reels is where you get the discovery. That's where you're trying to get new people. You are playing the Instagram game. And Spotify and everyone on Instagram knows that. Instagram feed is slightly different. Instagram feed is where you provide value. This is where you show off who you are a bit more. We're not just going after these discovery numbers, but now we are telling a deeper story. And this bit's very, very important because anybody who works as a curator or anybody who works in Spotify will be going and checking your socials. And yes, they will check numbers. But what's really interesting here is numbers don't matter as much as you think that they do. What really matters is momentum. How does this buzz, how does this artist fit into this particular playlist? Now, I think this bit's really important because for all the people who say, oh, I don't want to go on TikTok and I don't want to make micro content and I don't want to make mini music videos. Okay, great. Even with some real high quality photo shoots, which is artistic, which shows you off as an artist, this can show who you are and where you fit in and who your demographic is. So photo shoots mean a lot more than you think that they do. Now, when it comes to pitching your music, it's all about timing, and we need to give Spotify enough time, which is 4 weeks. Don't forget, things can go wrong, and if they can, they usually do. And you need to give Spotify plenty of time to figure out who you are, what you do, and more importantly, where this music could potentially go. So then we are in the business end when it comes to pitching, and there are some golden rules that can really help. Don't forget, massive artists will have people. We probably have to start with AI. And so therefore, we are playing that game. Don't forget that. This is about data, but it's also about AI. What will the AI recognize? Now, the first golden rule is to be specific with every single question. Spotify is trying to figure out who you are. And if you say, I don't really know where I fit in, I don't really know who I sound like because I don't sound like anybody, that might be true. The problem is you are not helping yourself because Spotify doesn't understand. And this is not subjectivity of one person saying, hey, you might not know where you fit in, but I do. This is AI saying, hang on, you've got to give me something. So we have to be specific. Now, the technicalities of the first part of this pitch are pretty simple. It's multiple choice questions and you need to be specific. But then comes to the dreaded box where you have to fill in a description about you and about your song. And what do you put, especially if you don't have that much to write outside of this song? Well, going back to the fact that this is probably AI and algorithmic generated, we need to think about that when we are pitching. So therefore, a heavily SEO'd pitch is very important. SEO is search engine optimization. Effectively, it will recognize key phrases. It will recognize certain words. So therefore, if we can use certain words to help it along, it will make all of the difference. So therefore, you are looking at things like genres, you are looking at things like locations, you are looking at things like bands or artists that you like, because these are recognizable words that help it funnel where your music should go. Now, the description only has 500 characters, so the hard part isn't telling the world who you are and why this song's amazing. The hard part is how to do this in a very small space. So going back to the SEO, the key phrases, the words, anything that you have done which is noteworthy should go into this description. We don't need a CV, we need the headlines. We need the most important things. Now, if you're saying, I haven't done anything yet, I've just written this song, there's nothing noteworthy, we'll come back to that in a second. Now, a really helpful tip is do your research, find a playlist that you think that you will fit into, and then add that into the description, i.e., this track is best suited for this playlist. Now, what you're doing here is you're doing the work for them, but you're also adding that SEO. So it could be best suited for all new metal playlist, or best suited for fresh folk playlist, because it's a Spotify algorithmic playlist and it will understand what that means. Lastly, we want to show Spotify how we are going to market this song and how we are going to drive traffic to the platform. So therefore, if you are doing an ad strategy, if you are currently on tour, if you are doing a social media heavy strategy, you should add this into your pitch. Now, a couple of good practices that should help out. Being a musician doesn't necessarily mean that you are a creative writer. So either use Grammarly or even better than that, use ChatGPT. But when you use ChatGPT, use the prompt, which is write me a Spotify pitch in under 500 characters using this information. And then what it will do is it will condense that and write it up for you. Secondly, artwork is really important. The amount of times I'll see someone put a picture of a tree or a view and I'm like, it just doesn't tell anybody about you, the artist. This isn't about putting something pretty on there. This is about defining who you are and why people are going to care. So pay attention to the artwork and keep it simple. A really good picture of you makes all of the difference. Now, another good measure is be careful with how many songs you are releasing, because you can only pitch one song at a time. So if you release a double A side, that can be very good for music marketing, but you can only pitch one of those songs. If you are releasing an EP, again, you can only pitch one song at a time. Now, what happens if you're a new artist or you're just thinking, I just have nothing to say in this description? Well, let me tell you a story. So I was a radio DJ for a couple of years, and as a radio DJ, I would play new music on the show. That's what the show was all about. And every single day, this was back in the day of CDs, every single day I would get a huge pile of CDs that would come through. The problem is I would be working at the music college all day until about 6 o'clock. The show was 4 days a week, 7 until 10, 3 hours a night. So I had an hour to get from the college to the radio station. In that time, I've got to eat, I've got to meet my co-host, have a chat with him about what he's been doing, and pick up a massive pile of CDs, and then think there's probably around about 24 hours, 48 hours worth of music here. I haven't got time to listen to it. So what do? I start doing something that most artists and musicians would think is disgusting. I'm thumbing through going, no, 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 no. What am I looking for? I don't know. I'm looking for anything that's going to catch my eye. So therefore, if it's a really good piece of art, it might catch my eye. If it's a really good song title, it might catch my eye. For example, if the song title is called something like Mosh Pit in the Nursing Home, I might be like, that's funny. I wonder what that sounds like. Whereas if someone puts a title of You, I'm like, it didn't make me imagine anything, so it would be gone. So therefore, presentation means a lot. The song titles, it means a lot. All of this stuff matters. Now, before people start going in the comments and telling me about massive artists that break the rules, I understand that. But when we start, this is like riding a bike. The hardest part with riding a bike is getting started, because you have no speed to keep the balance. You've got to get your feet on the pedals. Once you've got a little bit of speed, it gets easier. Once you get a bit more speed, it gets easier. Once you start pedaling and pedaling and pedaling and pedaling, you can take your feet off the pedals and your hands off the pedals, and you are going to carry on going. That's where most of these artists are at. We are not there yet. What we've got to do is we've got to build up that momentum in order for us to feel safe enough to take our feet or hands off. Now, lastly, let's just put into perspective what we are trying to do. What we are trying to do here is, over a period of time, get in the room. There might be 50 or 60 songs on a Spotify playlist, but there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of tracks being released every single week. So what we've got to do is we've got to start building up the data. So this isn't about one song. This is about really good strategies, really good releases, and really good measures over a period of time. Every single we release that song, we do something really, really good that helps us build a little bit of buzz and a little bit of traction, hopefully to get into the room. That's what we're trying to do, because if we can get into the room, it is much, much easier to get onto playlists with your 4th, your 5th, your 6th, your 7th song. So this isn't about song 1, it's about song 10. But in order for it to be about song 10, we have to make sure that song 1 counts. So think of it like a football team. You might be an up-and-coming football player who signs to a big team. Does that mean you're going to break into the first team? Absolutely not. So what do we got to do? Well, we've got to impress. So in training, in practice, on weekdays, what we've got to do is we've got to show that we are ready for when you are ready, that we can jump in. And at that point, when you're in, you have to make the most of it. And it's the same with music. What we're trying to do is we're trying to build a buzz over here. So once we're in the door, we get that opportunity. And at that point, we can really start to drive song after song after song. So hopefully that helps with your playlist pitch. Make sure you don't overthink. Make sure you're very, very specific, and make sure this is a strategy for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 singles, because this is a marathon, not a race. If you've got any other tips, I would love to hear you. I do lots of pitches, and it's just something that I have my routine for, but I would love to know anything that you've got. So if you've got any tips, anything that's worked for you, stick it in the comments below. If you can do me a favor, hit that like button, because it does make a huge difference. And I'll catch you on the next one.